Hello number ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking. I've recently made a video called Knights vs Mongols where I spoke about the historical events that happened during the so-called Mongol invasions of Europe. Now, stopping the Mongols' advance was a very difficult task. The question for today is, could have the Romans succeeded where mostly the knights and medieval armies failed? You see, technologically speaking, a 13th century medieval army was more advanced than, say, a Roman imperial army of the times of the Principate, hands down. Medieval metallurgy was more advanced, armor and weapons were generally speaking more sophisticated. But the outcome of battles and war rarely depend only on the weapons and armor used by the armies and nations that fight each other. There are a lot of factors at play. Weapons and armor. How professional and experienced are the commanders? Are the troops battle-hardened? Are they highly disciplined? Are they well-funded, well-fed, rested? How well do these empires understand logistics? Is there an element of surprise during the battles? Is anyone outnumbered? And ultimately, money. Which empire is the most economically sound? Now, the reason why I think this is an interesting discussion is because, yes, medieval armies are more futuristic compared to Roman armies, but we have to remember that when the Mongols invaded Europe, Europe wasn't one unified empire like it would have been at the times of the Romans, for example. You didn't have one political, military and financial body behind it. You had many different so-called nations, and that is, I think, one of the main reasons why medieval armies were never as professional as Roman armies. So it's interesting for the purposes of this video and our speculative discussion to think, would that have made a difference? Would the imperial Roman system have worked better at defending Europe against very strategically organized Mongols than the medieval feudal system and the way it fielded armies? Now, on this channel I've been speaking about swords and shields and bows and arrows, weapons and armor, and most importantly, on this specific series, I've been speaking about civilizations fighting one against the other, and that is why I'd like to talk about the sponsor that made this video possible, Rise of Kingdoms. Rise of Kingdom lets you choose between 11 different civilizations such as Rome, Britain, Japan, China, Korea, etc. Now, personally, I've chosen the Romans. Of course, they are pretty strong, pretty tough, and of course, as special unit, they've got the legionaries. Now, here is my city, and I'm in the Bronze Age, and this game features a seamless, huge map that is always moving in real time. I'd like to show you that. Right now, I'm going to start producing some units. I just created some soldiers. I'm going to produce more. Now, there are a lot of things you can do. Now, for example, I'm harvesting resources. As you can see, I sent one of my commanders there to do that. But I'm going to use the other commander to do something very, very Roman, because I like role-playing a little bit in these games, and I'm going to kill barbarians. So let's just muster forces and do just that. So here we are, let's go look for them. I'm going to go against level 7 barbarians. And I'm going to muster an army, choose a commander who's... I love his Latin. So we're going to go with all the troops I have, and let's do it. Filthy barbarians, there you go, and now back home. If you want to join in the fun, check the link in the description below to download Rise of Kingdoms, and of course, this game is actually a lot of fun. I've been playing it, and I am going to continue playing it. Personally, I've always liked games like this, but this one is particularly fun, so it's highly suggested. Also, if you check the link below, you'll find information on a giveaway they are doing for over 30 AR500 armored gift card. So big thanks to Rise of Kingdom for sponsoring my channel, and I am going to use the support that they are giving me to get a Brigandine, a medieval piece of armor that I've already ordered and it's already in production, and I will use that to make content for the channel, because that's how I like using support from sponsors. I'd like to reuse it entirely for the channel and for the production so that I can offer you higher quality content. So look forward to that armor because it's going to be amazing. I've already spoken about the Mongols, and I'll leave some links in the description below to videos that deal with Mongolian warfare a bit more in details in this one, but of course the first thing that comes to mind is mounted archery, so mounted archers, and clearly they also had many other kinds of troops. They had shock cavalry, they had infantry, they had access to Chinese engineers, but generally speaking, mounted archery is what you think as one of the decisive troops and style of warfare that the Mongols could employ very effectively on the field. And of course they had very professional commanders. Imperial Romans would of course use scuta, they would use gladi, and they would mostly use heavy infantry, although they could, and I would say probably would, deploy auxiliary cavalry and most likely auxiliary archers. So when we're looking at weapons and armor, we're also looking at types of troops. Would the Romans start using more cavalry to try and respond to the high cavalry-oriented kind of troops that the Mongolians would field? And I would say probably not, because that's not exactly how the Romans have reacted to cavalry-based enemies at the time. They would respond with heavy infantry, and against mounted archers, I think the Romans, tactically speaking, would respond with auxiliary archers. To have an idea on how the Romans would have reacted to this, we could have a look at the Battle of the Catalonian Plains, where the Romans had to face Attila the Hun. I think they wouldn't change their scutum and gladius combination. Of course, every Roman soldier would have armor, either mail, called lorica hamata, or plate, called segmentata. They would probably still use those. And they would definitely use techniques such as the testudo to protect their soldiers against archers. We know that they were using that, and I think that they would continue to do that. I don't really see the need for a change in equipment for the Romans, and although we know that the Romans did do those, like during the Dacian Wars, they adapted their equipment to their opponents. So if they did lose a few battles against the Mongols, they would probably make some changes. But in this case, I think general scutum, gladius, lorica, helmet, galea type of equipment would be fine. I think what they would need to change is the sort of troops and units that they would place. In terms of commanders and professionalism, I think the Romans would do a better job than any medieval army that actually faced the Mongols during the Mongol invasion. I think it would be really epic to see a highly trained, highly experienced and very professional Roman commander, a legatus, such as for example Scipio Africanus, facing one of the best Mongol generals. Their different but equally effective operational vision, their different ways to reach their military objectives, I would be breathtaking. Still, if we had to compare the sort of commanders that medieval 13th century Hungary, for example, had, and the sort of commanders that the Roman Empire usually had, then definitely in this case, and from this specific point of view, the Romans would have the edge. The Romans would have the better commanders. Oftentimes when we look at history, when we have a very skilled commander, he manages to overcome his opponents even when outnumbered, even when in unfavorable conditions, and that is probably one of the things that really made certain commanders and generals in history stand out. What they managed to do, the effective optimal usage and implementation of the resources and the things that they could work with. How important is discipline, and how much would the discipline of soldiers influence the outcome of a battle? Also, what sort of discipline would we expect from a medieval army and the soldiers of a medieval army? I reckon one of the main differences between a Roman fielded army and a medieval fielded army, medieval kingdom fielded army, is the fact that there will be a huge variety. You see, even though the Roman army wasn't as uniform as Hollywood or video games want us to believe, still there would be a certain threshold, a certain expected level of professionalism within the Roman army that would be rather homogeneous throughout the empire. Instead, in a medieval perspective of a kingdom fielding an army, you would have a huge amount of variation. It would really very much depend on whether that army was fielded by Germany, was fielded by Italy, the Vatican, was it fielded by France, was it fielded by Hungary, was it fielded by Poland, etc. Keeping in mind that I'm using these names fully aware of the fact that, for example, Italy wasn't one state at the time. Unfortunately, apparently I had to say it, because I found people in the comments telling me that, hey, Italy hasn't been a country for more than 170 or 180 years. I'm like, yes, I'm Italian. Thank you for that. Anyways, without digressing too much, a medieval army, the discipline of the soldiers in the medieval army would vary tremendously. You would have a elite kind of soldier, such as, I don't know, the Templars, for example, so the Holy Orders. Those would have a tremendous kind of professionalism and training and also discipline. But when you look at levies, peasant levies, or people who weren't actual professional soldiers, so generally speaking, when brought into a campaign, then their kind of professionalism and their kind of discipline would be nothing compared to the general level of discipline that a Roman soldier would have. The reason for that is because in the medieval period, the knights and the men-at-arms were the professionals, but they were just a portion of an army. You could have mercenary soldiers such as crossbowmen who could also be considered to be professionals, but you would also have a big amount of soldiers who were not professionals at all. For the Romans instead, every single soldier would be a professional. So you can see how that already would make a big difference. In terms of discipline, the Roman Empire could field highly trained and highly professional soldiers, much more than any medieval kingdom could. Discipline and professionalism was exactly one of the things that made the Mongols extremely effective, and that is the reason why I think fielding a Roman army against the Mongols, you would have an advantage in terms of discipline if compared to fielding the sort of medieval armies that they fought. Now clearly the Mongols didn't really fight the entirety of Europe, and that is one thing that we need to keep in mind, that I've also said in my other video on this topic. They only fought a certain portion of Europe, and they never really fought the entirety of the Holy Orders, the full military power of the Vatican at the time. Yet, if these invasions happened during the unified Roman Empire, in terms of professionalism and discipline, they would have had to fight much more effective soldiers. Battle-hardened troops. How important would it be to have battle-hardened soldiers? How much of a difference does it really make? So you see, when we talk about the Mongols, well, not only their soldiers were battle-hardened, but also their commanders had a lot of experience. Direct, real experience. Now, when talking about the sort of medieval soldiers that they fought, some would have been, others would have not been. In terms of the Romans, that is definitely something that a Roman army would be able to bring to the table. Great, so the majority of Roman soldiers would have been battle-hardened, and the same for all the officers, all the way up to the legatus. How much of a difference would that really make? Well, a huge difference. Having battle-hardened soldiers is really something that sometimes I think is underappreciated, because you might think, well, but a sword is a sword, so if you give a sword to an idiot, he was still going to be dangerous. That is true. A battle-hardened soldier is someone who is a professional, who has been doing it for years, who has survived for many years, and knows exactly what to expect from a confrontation, from real life-to-death combat. That means not only an advantage from a physical point of view in terms of training, but the psychological difference. That is where I really draw the line in terms of how effective a battle-hardened soldier would be compared to someone who is fresh, a fresh recruit, if you will, or someone who just has never experienced real battle. And the psychological aspect in combat and warfare is enormous, gigantic. A soldier who has experienced real first-hand experience and has done it many times is going to be a much more effective soldier. And think of the fact that the Mongols did use psychological terror a lot as one of the cards that they played to overcome their opponents. Some of the things that they did when they would take, for example, they would plunder and pillage a village that didn't have any strategic relevance, and they only pillaged not for keeping but mostly for gaining resources. They would just butcher everyone, kill the animals, kill the children, kill the women, kill everyone, and then let it be known to our opponents that if they dare fight with us, if they dare face us, that's what's going to happen to them. And it worked. But against someone who has got real first-hand battle experience and has been doing it for years, like a professional Roman soldier would have, probably this sort of psychological warfare wouldn't really have the same impact as it would with someone who doesn't even know what it means to face someone in life-to-death combat. Now, the last point I'd like to make today is money, the financial capability of an empire compared to the financial capability of single countries in the medieval period, and specifically the countries that faced the Mongols. Money is what makes the difference between winning a war and winning a battle. The relevance of money and the importance of money and the ability not only to pay your soldiers but to fund them well is often underappreciated, and it is a very important, paramount to be able to do that consistently and continuously to be able to win a war. And that is one of the reasons oftentimes when we look at wars, we see a lot of spoils of wars. We see a lot of plundering and subsequent taxation of the new provinces acquired, which is something that Rome did very well and systematically well. You can have the best equipment in the world, but if you don't have the money to replenish your troop rosters, to keep the morale of your soldiers high, to pay them well, things eventually will not go your way. So I think that is one of the reasons that if the Mongols had invaded Europe during the time of the peak of the Roman Empire, it would have been a lot harder for them to break through. Now, that doesn't mean that a united Europe in the medieval period in the 13th century, with all the monastic orders, with all countries involved together to block the Mongols, would have been an easy task or an easy take. But that's not what happened during the Mongol invasions. Specifically, the Mongols fought just a few countries, not the most well prepared in Europe anyways at the time. And that is one of the reasons why I think it would have been harder for the Mongols to go through Europe the way they did if it was still under Roman control. But let me know what you think, if you agree, if you disagree, and if you liked this video, please remember thumbs up, and don't forget to check the link in the description below for the sponsor that made this video possible, Rise of Kingdoms. And if you're not yet members of this community, become a noble one, subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron. Leave any suggestion for any other video of the VS series that you would like me to make in the comments below. And remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.